She's lying in bed at 32 weeks, hand resting on her belly when she feels it. Tiny, rhythmic, bup, 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 every few seconds like a metronome buried somewhere beneath her ribs. At first, she thinks it's a kick, but kicks don't repeat like this. Kicks are sudden, scattered, alive. This is different. This is steady. This is patterned. She lies very still in the dark, counting them. And after a minute, she pulls out her phone and types the question almost every pregnant woman eventually types into Google. Why is my baby hiccuping in the womb? And the answer she gets is almost always the same. A short paragraph from a hospital website, a reassuring sentence from a pregnancy app. It's normal. It's nothing to worry about. Don't think about it too much. But here's what nobody tells her, and what most doctors will never sit down and explain in a 15-minute prenatal appointment. Those tiny rhythmic pulses aren't random. They're not a glitch. They're not a quirk. They are one of the most extraordinary things happening inside her body right now, and once you understand what they actually are, you will never feel them the same way again. For decades, fetal hiccups were essentially a medical shrug. Doctors observed them on ultrasound as early as the 9th week of pregnancy. They knew babies hiccuped dozens of times a day, sometimes for an hour at a stretch, and they assumed it was just a leftover reflex with no real purpose. Some textbooks called it an evolutionary holdover from when our ancestors had gills. Others suggested it was the diaphragm twitching for no particular reason. Either way, the conclusion was the same. It's harmless, it's normal, move on. And that's exactly what mothers have been told for generations. But in the last several years, a quiet revolution in neonatal neuroscience has completely rewritten our understanding of what's actually happening when a baby hiccups inside the womb, and the truth is so beautiful that it changes how you think about your pregnancy entirely. The breakthrough came from a research team at University College London, led by Dr. Kimberley Whitehead. They studied newborn babies, some born prematurely and some at full term, and they did something nobody had done before. They attached sensors to the baby's scalps and recorded what happened in the brain every single time the baby hiccuped. What they found was staggering. Every hiccup triggered a massive wave of electrical activity in the baby's brain. Not a small flicker, not background noise, a huge coordinated burst of signaling that lit up the regions responsible for sensing and controlling the body. And then it hit the researchers what they were actually looking at. The baby's brain wasn't reacting to the hiccup. The hiccup was teaching the brain. Every contraction of that tiny diaphragm was sending a signal upward, and the brain was using that signal to build a map of where the lungs are, a map of how to feel the breath, a map of how to eventually, after birth, take that first miraculous gasp of air. In other words, your baby isn't hiccuping because something is happening to them. Your baby is hiccuping to teach their own brain how to breathe. And when you really sit with that, the implication is almost unbearable. The diaphragm cannot practice breathing in the womb the way it will after birth because the lungs are filled with fluid, not air. There is no oxygen exchange happening yet. So the body has invented a workaround, a rehearsal, a scaled-down version of the breathing motion that lets the brain wire up the circuits it will need in those first terrifying seconds after delivery. The hiccup is the dress rehearsal. The hiccup is how your baby's nervous system writes the software it will run for the rest of its life. And here's the part doctors almost never mention. The window for this rehearsal is short. Fetal hiccups peak in frequency between the 2nd and 3rd trimester, right when the brain is doing its most explosive wiring work. By the time the baby reaches full term, the hiccups taper off, not because they stop being possible, but because the brain has finished the lesson. The neural pathways are built. The map is drawn. The rehearsal is over. Premature babies who are born before this process completes often have a much harder time regulating their breathing in the NICU. And researchers now suspect those interrupted hiccup cycles may be part of the reason why. The hiccups weren't a quirk, they were a curriculum. And every time your baby goes through one of those rhythmic 20-minute sessions, they are essentially completing a lesson in the most important skill they will ever learn. Now, why don't doctors tell you this? It's not a conspiracy. It's something much more ordinary and much more frustrating. The Whitehead study came out in 2019. The implications are still being worked through in the academic literature, and the average obstetrician sees dozens of patients a day, has 15 minutes per appointment, and has been trained to answer the question, what is this, in the simplest, most reassuring way possible? So when you ask about hiccups, you get the version that fits in a sentence. It's normal. The version that fits in a video like this one, the version that took researchers decades to uncover, doesn't make it into the appointment. Not because anyone is hiding it from you, but because nobody has time to explain it. And that's a real loss because once you know what those rhythmic pulses actually are, the entire emotional experience of pregnancy shifts. Most moms describe the same pattern. The hiccups tend to come at the same time every day, often in the evening when she's finally lying down and the world is quiet enough for her to feel them. Sometimes after she eats, when her blood sugar rises and the baby becomes more active. Sometimes in the early morning before she's even fully awake. And there's a reason for that consistency. The fetal nervous system, even at this early stage, is already starting to build its own circadian rhythms. It's syncing to her body, it's borrowing her clock. The hiccups happen on a schedule because the baby's brain is starting to learn what time means, what rest means, what activity means, all by listening to the chemical signals her body sends across the placenta. That little metronome under her ribs isn't just a breathing rehearsal, it's also one of the first signs that her baby is becoming a creature with a sense of time. There's another thing nobody tells expectant mothers, and it's something every mom who has experienced fetal hiccups has secretly wondered about. Can the baby feel them? The honest answer is, we think so, but not the way you'd feel a hiccup. Adult hiccups are unpleasant because the body has a fully formed sensory system that interprets the diaphragm spasm as a disruption. The fetal brain hasn't built that interpretation yet. To the baby, the hiccup is more like a gentle thump from the inside, a repeated, familiar sensation. And here's where the science gets almost poetic. Because the same study that uncovered the brain mapping function of hiccups also found that each hiccup activates the parts of the brain responsible for interoception, the sense of being inside a body. Every hiccup is essentially the baby's brain receiving the message you exist, you are here, this is your body. The hiccup is one of the very first ways your baby learns that they are a self. And this is the moment in the story where most mothers, when they finally hear this, get a little quiet. Because you spend so much of pregnancy thinking about your baby as a future person, someone who will be born, someone you will meet, someone you will eventually hold, and then someone explains that those tiny, rhythmic pulses you've been feeling for weeks are the literal soundtrack of your baby discovering themselves. That every bup, bup, bup is another moment of an entirely new consciousness coming online. That your body is the auditorium where the most important rehearsal of a human life is taking place, and you have a front row seat to a performance no other person on earth will ever witness. The hiccups stop feeling like a curiosity. They start feeling like a privilege. Now, there is one more thing you need to know because it matters, and most pregnancy resources either skip it or bury it in fine print. The pattern of hiccups does carry medical information, especially in the third trimester. In the early and middle stages of pregnancy, hiccups can happen often and at irregular intervals, and that's completely expected. But once you cross into the final stretch, around 32 to 36 weeks, the hiccup pattern should start to settle and gradually decrease in frequency. If a baby in the very late third trimester suddenly starts hiccuping intensely and persistently, especially in long, repeated episodes throughout the day, some studies have associated that pattern with potential umbilical cord compression. It is rare. It is not the most common cause. And in the vast majority of cases, late pregnancy hiccups are still completely benign. But it is worth knowing the pattern, and it is worth mentioning it to your provider if something feels different. Trust the rhythm you've come to know over the months. If it suddenly changes in a way that worries you, say something. The hiccup is data. Treat it like data. For most mothers, though, what they will remember is not the rare warning sign. What they will remember is those quiet evenings in the third trimester, the lamp on the nightstand, the book half open on the blanket, the hand resting on the belly, and the small, steady rhythm beneath their palm. Bup, bup, bup. They will remember not knowing what it was. And they will remember the moment somebody finally told them. That sound was not random. That sound was not a glitch. That sound was their child's brain, in real time, wiring itself for the first breath. That sound was their child's nervous system learning where it ended and the world began. That sound was a small human being, somewhere inside their body, becoming a person. There is something the old anatomy textbooks got wrong, and the new neuroscience has been quietly correcting for the last several years. The womb is not a passive container. It is not a hotel room where the baby waits to be born. It is the most active classroom a human being will ever attend. Inside it, in those 9 months, every system in the body is being calibrated, tested, and rehearsed. The eyes are practicing focus on the dim glow that filters through the abdominal wall. The ears are practicing pattern recognition on the muffled rhythm of the mother's voice. The hands are practicing grip on the umbilical cord, and the diaphragm, that flat sheet of muscle that will one day pull air into a pair of lungs for the very first time, is practicing the only way it can, through hiccups. Tiny, repeated, patient rehearsals of a skill that has to work perfectly the moment the baby is born because there is no second chance. So the next time she feels that little metronome under her ribs, the rhythmic pulse that doctors brush off in a single sentence, she should know exactly what is happening. Her baby is not bothered. Her baby is not uncomfortable. Her baby is studying. Her baby's brain is sending signals down to the diaphragm, and the diaphragm is sending signals back up to the brain, and in that quiet conversation, neuron by neuron, breath by practice breath, a future person is being assembled. The hiccups are not a quirk of pregnancy. They are the first chapter of a life. And the woman lying in the dark with her hand on her belly is not just feeling movement. She is feeling the moment her child began to learn how to be alive. That's the part doctors won't say, not because they don't care, but because the truth is too big for 15 minutes, and too quiet for a brochure, and too tender to fit on a website that has to also list every possible warning sign. The truth is that those little rhythmic pulses you feel late at night are one of the most extraordinary events in human development, and you are the only person in the world who gets to witness them happening from the inside. Most pregnant women never find out what they're really feeling. Now you know. And the next time the rhythm starts, you can rest your hand a little more gently against your belly, take a slow breath of your own, and listen to your baby's first lesson in how to breathe. If this video gave you a new way to feel your baby's hiccups, take a second to like it and subscribe because we go deep on the science most pregnancy channels are too rushed to explain. And if you have a moment, leave a comment telling us when you first felt your baby hiccup and what you thought it was. We read every one because every pregnancy is its own quiet miracle, and every mother deserves to know what's really happening inside her body. Take care of yourself this week. We'll see you in the next one.